Well, we have to start off with fighters because they're by far the most popular role in jungle. And it's not even close. That's because they're often stable in the meta and define the meta. They're fun to play, they have the highest pick rates, and mostly the highest carry potential. Why is that the case? Well, that's because they have everything in terms of damage, survivability, tankiness as it were, peeling for your teammates, engaging for your teammates, and then carrying their corpses across the finish line. The whole thing about them is as a class, you've got things like Virkayu, then you have the AP variety in the Diana, you've got your Volleybers, your Hekrims, your Warwicks, Jarvans, Vys, Nocturnes, and Wukongs. Each of those have similarities and differences that allow them to thrive in most scenarios. As far as their jungling goes, yes, some of them can full clear and want to scale up into the mid and the late game. Not often the case with fighters as they're heavily dominated by early game junglers, but at the same time they have the ability to have high economy, good farm. This is the class that wants to get in the face of everybody, essentially. You're looking to contest, you're looking to fight, you're looking to snowball leads, and a lot of them have this built-in sustain and or CC. They have what we can basically say is a little bit of everything. Someone like Volleybird, for example, has point-and-click stuns and great ultimates for teamfights, but he also has sustain in his W too. Someone like a Virkayu has less reliable CC in his W, but he gets resets to dominate teamfights and can go invisible. Then you've got things like Ross, which out-sustain and lives for everything. Then you got things like Lee Sin, which basically have high mobility, shielding, kicks for disengage, map mobility executes, and you've got things like Vi, which have point-and-click ultimates that dominate metas when Zeri exists. Why Zeri exists is a whole separate question. She shouldn't. It's essentially what you can gather from this discussion, a versatile class. You got the farmers, you got the gankers, and you know that there's a good mix of those as well. Ultimately, what are you looking for in a fighter? How should you basically play them as a blanketed statement? Well, I would say the ultimate thing about them is that they all have good dueling potential in one way or another. So you want to actually use that to scale and win games. Most of them have some form of hard CC or at least a lot of slows, which means they're really damn good at spiking for ganks. Something like a Hekrim has CC on his E, but also the ultimate. So while you can rotate and impact the map early, your level 6 is where you're gonna have that huge spike. Contrast that with something like, let's say, a Diana who really wants to focus much more on the 6, and then you got the Rek'Sai which really wants to focus much more on the level 3. There's always a balance of one way or the other, but the ganking is strong, the dueling is strong, and you are always looking to be active. Usually fighters tend to have good scaling across most stages of the game, right? I mentioned the late game, yeah, but a lot of fighters spike in the mid game hard. And that's why they're very, very popular, because it feels great as a jungler to get ganks off, to be able to farm, to be able to fight over objectives and actually win, to invade like I say a Bel'Veth does, and get in the face of the enemy jungler, while also having such a ridiculous amount of great itemization scaling through the gold that you get. And ultimately, the reason it's so popular as a class in the jungle is because it does everything, but as you can gather, there are so many to choose from with so many different mechanics that allow you to bend the rules of solo queue into your favor so that you can actually carry, win, and climb. Some fighters in teamfights are looking to dive, disrupt, and, sow confusion, and some are looking to peel a little bit more, and others are looking to be a pseudo-assassin on the backline. That has changed a little bit, and we'll talk about that as we get to that section. But if you need extra help for that, Kaido.gg is having mega sales for the end of the season. Go ahead and get the courses and information and tips you need to reach those peaks and set yourself up for Season 15 success. Also, everything will have Season 15 updates coming as soon as possible at the start of the year. And if you need a new practice tool to get your mechanics good and juicy, Skill Gap is the one to go to. Links for both of these will be in the description below. Improve and get better with the only 2 things you need as a jungler to reach your peaks as fast as possible. Now let's talk about everybody's favorite class, mages. Actually, that is my favorite class along with tanks. People don't like mages mostly because they are simply unskilled players. Are you an unskilled player? Don't be one. Yes, they have a lot of damage. Yes, they power farm and clear. But when you're power farming and clearing, when Karthus is doing that or Fiddle is doing that, what exactly are you doing if you're a fighter? You can kill them. They are mostly immobile. The only exception to this would be potentially the Lilia, who I really view as more of an AP bruiser slash fighter, but technically she is a mage because she has AP scaling and she does that kind of mage damage, but really she plays more like a fighter. Your Karthuses, your Fiddles, your Brands, your Shyvanas, your Zyras, even your Talias, they have a certain way of playing. and that is they don't have map mobility. You can get onto them and kill them when they have no flash. Yeah, sure, they have disengage, but that's where your skill set comes in against them as an assassin, with your Edge of Night, with your abilities as a fighter, because mages don't usually have enough damage early on. They scale with items and levels really well. They want to get to the mid and the late game. They want to have this high damage output once they are ahead of the enemy jungler in both levels and items. You see, the thing is about that, most people simply don't have enough proactive jungling in their mind and in their playstyle to punish mages, and that's when they become very dangerous. But at the same time, they are not easy to play, yes? If you have terrible positioning, you will die. If you have terrible mechanics in terms of your skill shots, you will die. You are cooldown reliant and mana reliant and rotational reliant, which means when your spells are up, you gotta hit them to maximize your damage. You don't have sustained DPS, you're not gonna thrive on auto attacks in between your spell usage. You have to hit your spells and you have to be able to get itemization so that those spells do something. That means you're more looking to counter gank or play around your ultimate. Yes, you are a power farmer, and a lot of the time you look to play away from the enemy jungler who can get in your face and kill you, especially those fighter players. You're some of the squishiest champions in the game in terms of the classes, but you do have the most CC and the most burst damage in a fight. Some mages obviously have DPS over time, like the Zyras and Brands, but it is a much more one-dimensional playstyle, the exception here being the Lilia, who will get in your face. And obviously we could throw in Elise here, but I'm going to talk about Elise in the assassin class because that is essentially what she is. Much like the Evelyns, Rengars, Shaco's, Echoes, Kha'Zix's, and so on, these champions have high damage output in pick scenarios, which means just 1v1, you obliterate it and die, or in team fights. And the biggest success with these kinds of champions is escaping death. They bring forth death and also avoid death. And each one has a unique mechanic for that. For example, Talon has his ultimate, he goes camera, does the kills, runs away. Echo is empowered W if he needs to truly escape, although he's one of the few that kind of goes in to kill and not really leave. Kha'Zix has multiple R's. Echo has his ultimate also to reset. Kayn can go up and then run away with his E. But Elise, she goes in. She wants to hit the cocoon, she wants to explode people, and then she wants to repel to the next target and do it again, form swapping the entire time. Now again, this is not necessarily a debate on what you want to classify a certain champion as. I'm basically going with the optimized playstyle for them, but also describing what these kinds of champions do in general, so that if you want to play that style, you have a good choice of champions to choose from, and you understand what you need to accomplish in the game. Now, what I have mentioned here a little bit is CC, yes? Now, assassins usually have lower CC and are squishy, but they have the biggest burst potential in the game. They are the definition of selfish picks, and I almost said that word with an R in the middle, because, you know, it would be true. But they ultimately have some of the highest 1v9 potential in all their games, and I did mention low CC, I wanted to circle back to that. Echo, a lot of CC. Rengar has E-Flash, Ebola Virus, hard CC, but it's conditional. Shaco has Fear, Evelyn has Charms and Slows, but they have to be used in the exact right moment on the exact right target, and usually it comes at the expense of some burst potential in other ways. Ultimately, what you just want to focus on as an assassin is, do I need to farm a little bit more here to scale with items in gold, like a power farming mage? Or should I get in the face of people like, say, a fighter and try and snowball harder? It's very normal for an assassin to have multiple kills and multiple deaths, say like 3-2-0, 4-2-0 nice, because the gold you get, if you have more than the enemy, will be way better used on you. Even being 2-2-0 early, you know as an assassin, hey, I'm scaling harder than you are right now, you will die from this. Your goal isn't to go and try and kill Lisa in one-on-one, although of course you can do that if you're fed enough. Your goal is to be a nightmare for ADCs and mages. Your goal is to want to end the games early and not to get to the late game where everybody's bunching up with CC and team fights and Leonas and Amumu's. All you're looking for is to get your items. You can be 2-10 and 0, but once you get 3 items, an ADC is gonna die. The problem comes if the ADC has 4 items or 3 items, and now it's a little bit more difficult. So try and keep that itemization advantage in your favor. If that requires you to be more aggressive and go for more ganks, you do it. If that requires you to be a bit more passive and play around your ultimate and counter jungle just to show up with 1 item and you're level 7, you can do that as well. Assassins are the ultimate predators, the free hunters of the map, and that's why it's a more difficult class to play. People think it's easy. It really isn't to be a good assassin player, because you need to understand your dynamic itemization. You need to actually be able to get those advantages, and when team fights do happen, and they will, and skirmishes do happen, and they will, how good is your target selection? Are you getting in through the backline? Are you realizing that, yeah, the ADC is kind of fed, but if I kill the Soraka, then there's nothing going to save that ADC and I will kill them as well? Are you actually flanking intelligently? Or are you running in face first and dying and complaining like SpongeBob that assassins are weak? I say all of this not to insult. I play assassins also, I love them. But the thing is, most people who complain about assassins aren't playing them correctly. They are really strong in the 99.9% of cases, and they are never really weak to climbing. Don't confuse a challenger level game with a dominant teamfighting comp against a Rengar and a Kha'Zix versus what you're actually facing in your chosen rank and goal when you can just steamroll everybody with a bit better jungling technique. Now here's the thing, right? There's a fed assassin jungler against you, but you don't like playing fighters, you don't like playing mages, and you don't like playing assassins, so you're playing a tank. The problem with tanks lately is a lot of them end up building some sort of damage at them to do a little bit more than they should, and that's a Riot Games problem. But ultimately, the idea behind these champions, the Skarners, the Udyrs, the Zacs, the Nunas, the Sejuanis, is to build full tank itemization and to peel your ADCs and priority targets, your mages as well, yes, against those assassins and fighter divers. Now, they are mostly supports for the team, but not really supports, right? They are the CC bots, the meat shields, the soakers of damage. They are classified as easier to play, quote unquote, because essentially you're not as much concerned about your own resource infusion. You're looking to gank for lanes, get them ahead, and play around that appropriately. You have a great mix of team fighters and gankers, with a few outliers being, like the Zac and the Udyr being really, really good farmers. The Skarner as well can be. But you're looking with these champions to really get in the face of laners, not necessarily junglers. If a tank like, say, a Nunu and an Udyr and a Skarner are running into the enemy jungler and killing them one-on-one, that's not ideal, and I would look at why that's being allowed to happen to you, but at the same time, those champions do a little bit too much most of the time than what they should be doing as a tank. It's worth noting here, I'm talking about the Liandry's full tank Udyr, not the fighter AD Udyr, which would be in the fighter section, different style. Now, in general, and even currently with this itemization with Liandry's and things, these are not good damage dealers by themselves. They provide the utility of CC, peeling, and engaging. Target swapping in teamfights. Engage if you need to, then turn back and peel for your ADC. That is where good tank play becomes very difficult, and no one will ever appreciate you or understand what the hell you did, but you will know, and you will climb from it. But as I said, even with that damage, you will lack that agency, even if you get fed. If all your laners suck and you don't do your job properly and the enemy jungler gets fed, doesn't matter if you have Liandry's full tank Nunu, you're still not going to be able to 1v9 the game necessarily. You gotta play it properly for lanes. The damage does help you carry the game, but not by doing the damage it does, but by being and making the correct fights, which will provide your team with advantages around those objectives as well. The more opportunities you have to get your team ahead, the more you can carry as a tank, because that is when you are most powerful. Next up, we have Marksman, and the reason why we're putting it here is because there's only really two, basically. There's just two. Graves and Kindred. They are the ranged champions, and they're squishy, but do a hell of a lot of damage. They like to get in your face, they like to counter jungle, they like to snowball, and the thing is about them, they have great earlies, great mid games, and they also scale really well. And the reason why they aren't more marksmen in the jungle is because it is a toxic playstyle when broken, as we all know from these two champions. Ranged advantage against a melee champion when they have this kind of mobility basically equals, well, when they have the lead, there's not much you can do about it. Their auto attacks cannot be dodged, they have great dueling often enough, they can both farm and gank, their itemization is insanely versatile. Do you want Trinity Force and go a bit more bruiser? Do you guys remember the Gore Drinker Graves meta? Do you want Black Cleaver or Lord Dominic's Regard or Mortal Reminder? Or do you want to go with lethality a little bit? Or do you want to go full crit? I just listed basically every item in the game outside of tank items, and that's because they can do that and have done that for many years. When you play Kindred and you play Graves, you are a high tempo, high pressure, 1v9 jungler. If you play it any other way, you will not succeed. Yeah, you can play win con, yeah, you can split push, but the name of the game is jungle domination using a ranged advantage to take over. Now you will notice I haven't mentioned Nidalee, and I'm going to bring the support category up now, which only has Ivern, and I'm going to throw in Nidalee, just as a joke though. Let me tell you about Ivern, then we'll talk about Nidalee. Basically, the support jungle position is only Ivern, or Smite Janna top lane, which was the biggest abomination in the history of mankind, because the support Janna for jungle is literally Ivern. It's only about teammates and reverse clearing and taking your camps. You have the best peeling of any class because your shields are spammable. You have roots, you have bushes, you have a giant golem Daisy, and you scale as much as your teammates do. You carry games like Tank do, but you don't use your body to tank stuff. You use Daisy, and you basically sit on the back line and shield and be an active support for your win condition. If that's a Zeri, if that's a Syndra, it doesn't matter. We would love to have more players and champions do this, but the thing is, it's a really niche playstyle, and while Ivern has been Astro broken for about 14 decades, a lot of these things can be done via tanks who might not necessarily have the shielding, but they have the peeling, they have the supportive playstyle kind of wrapped in there as well. People just don't want to run around shielding and doing nothing else. Nidalee, though, I said I would mention her, is essentially a mix of a lot of things. She is the most difficult jungler to learn in the game mechanically because she's got the form swapping of Elise, but she's also a bit of a mage with a spear toss. She's a bit supportive with her healing when she gets going like that. And she's a bit of an assassin when she actually is fed enough to just go in and kill you. She's also a bit of a fighter when she wants to go for those form-swapping long duels. And that is why she's almost in a class of her own, but really she's just a combination of many of the others. If you want to understand how to jungle each of these classes in a way that is suited to the meta and allows you to carry in Season 15, click the video on your screen now.